Shaquita Bell was last seen on June 27, 1996, when she left her family's home on Raymond Street in Alexandria, Virginia, accompanied by her ex-boyfriend, Michael Eric Dickerson. The two were riding in his gray 1987 Cadillac Fleetwood, which had tinted windows. That day, Bell planned to take two of her 3 children to a doctor's appointment, with Dickerson driving. She called her family at 2 p.m. to say she would be home shortly, but she never returned and has not been heard from since. When questioned by police, Dickerson claimed they had gone to Southeast Washington, D.C., where they had an argument, and Bell left him there. However, her family was immediately concerned about her safety, as they believed Dickerson had been abusing her for some time. Neighbors reported hearing frequent loud arguments between the two, and Bell's mother stated that Dickerson controlled many aspects of Bell's life, including preventing her from attending church. A month before her disappearance, Bell reported to police that Dickerson had beaten her, and he was charged with malicious wounding. After that incident, Bell moved in with her grandmother in Alexandria and wrote a detailed account of the attack. Just 3 weeks later, she reported that Dickerson had threatened her again and held a loaded 9mm gun to her head. As a result, he was charged with unlawful possession of a firearm. After Bell vanished, her purse was found in the vehicle of Jonathan Jody Shields, a friend of Dickerson. Shields told police that Dickerson had confessed to killing Bell. According to Shields, Dickerson asked for his help in disposing of the body. Shields recounted that they went to Dickerson's house, where he saw Bell's body lying in the yard. He then acted as a lookout while Dickerson wrapped the body in a blanket and placed it in his car. The two drove to a wooded area along Old Fort Road in Fort Washington, Maryland, where Dickerson buried the body. In an effort to get more evidence, Shields agreed to visit Dickerson in jail, wearing a wire to record their conversations. However, on June 6, 1999, the day before this visit was scheduled, Shields was murdered. His death remains unsolved. In March 1997, authorities searched the yard of Dickerson's parents' home on G Street in Southeast Washington, D.C., but found no evidence related to Bell's case. Despite her disappearance, Dickerson was convicted of assaulting Bell, using her handwritten account of the attack as evidence. Bell's loved ones have always believed she was a victim of foul play. She was a clerk at the Giant Food Bakery at the time of her disappearance, had no criminal record, and was known as a responsible mother who would never abandon her children, the youngest of whom was only an infant in 1996. Complicating the case, 2 of Bell's previous boyfriends had been shot to death. One of the murders was believed to be drug-related. Fearing for her life, Bell kept a diary detailing her concerns and documenting her experiences, hoping it could be used as evidence if anything happened to her. In January 2008, while still in prison for assaulting Bell, Dickerson was charged with her murder, along with the murder of Sean A. Thomas, who had been shot to death on the street in February 1996. Police had interviewed Bell in June 1996 about Thomas's murder, and she told them Dickerson had confessed to the crime. When authorities informed Dickerson that he was a suspect in Thomas's murder, he became enraged, assuming Bell had turned him in. Investigators believe that part of his motive for killing Bell was to prevent her from implicating him further. In October 2008, Dickerson pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in Bell's case and admitted to killing Thomas as well. As part of his plea deal, he was not prosecuted for Thomas's murder. Dickerson led police to a wooded area in Prince George's County, Maryland, where he claimed to have buried Bell's body, but despite extensive searches, no remains were found. Dickerson was sentenced to 15 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Although he admitted to killing Bell, her body has never been recovered, and her case remains open. Authorities continue to suspect foul play due to the violent circumstances and Dickerson's criminal history. Marcus Barrel was last seen in early December 2001 in Virginia Beach, Virginia, where he shared an apartment on 22nd Street with his roommate, Carl Ellison. Barrel, a construction worker, struggled to hold a steady job and often faced financial difficulties. He occasionally used marijuana and LSD, and his drug use had led to his discharge from the Navy. Despite his troubles, Barrel kept in regular phone contact with his father, who lived in Louisiana. Their last conversation took place in the first week of December, when Basil expressed concern after giving his social security number to a man he had done work for. On December 9th, around 1 a.m., Ellison called Basil's father, worried because he hadn't seen Basil for a week. The police took a missing persons report on December 10th, but initially believed there was no cause for alarm. They speculated Basil might have gone to visit friends in Florida or Northern Virginia. However, when his father still hadn't heard from him by early January 2002, he urged the police to take the disappearance more seriously. Around 10 days after Basil was last seen, a neighbor and friend noticed that his champagne-colored Nissan Sentra was missing. By the end of December, Ellison had also disappeared, and authorities believe he may have fled the country. The neighbor later witnessed strangers clearing out Basil's apartment, removing his belongings, including his keyboard, drawings, furniture, and even his pet iguana. When she confronted them, they refused to explain what they were doing. The investigation took a bizarre turn in April 2002, when Troy P. Bodwin purchased a house in Granite Falls, North Carolina, using Basil's name. Bodwin, an insurance adjuster, had once hired Basil to do work on his home in Norfolk, Virginia. After being fired from his job in November 2001 for embezzling over $200,000 from the company, Bodwin stole Basil's identity to evade prosecution. Between December 2001 and January 2002, he managed to obtain 3 identity cards under Basil's name from the Department of Motor Vehicles, a copy of Basil's birth certificate, and a renewed passport with his own photo. He also secured credit cards in Basil's name. Using his stolen identity, Bodwin secured a job with an insurance company in North Carolina and began embezzling funds from them as well. The FBI was aware that Bodwin was using a false identity, but had no idea that the identity he assumed belonged to a missing person. In May 2002, after the FBI tracked Bodwin to North Carolina, he returned to Virginia Beach to negotiate a plea deal. However, when one of his girlfriends told him that the police had questioned her about Basil's disappearance, Bodwin checked into a Days Inn on Bonnie Road and took his own life. He left no suicide note. Authorities believe Bodwin murdered Basil to steal his identity and dispose of any loose ends. They also suspect Carl Ellison knows more about what happened to Basil, but he remains untraceable. Despite extensive investigations, no concrete evidence has surfaced to reveal what truly happened to Marcus Basil after his disappearance. In 2009, he was declared legally dead, but his case remains unsolved. Tammy Lynn Akers and her friend Angela Rader were last seen on February 7, 1977, in Roanoke, Virginia. That morning, one of the girls' relatives dropped them off at William Ruffner Jr. High School, but instead of attending classes, the 2 girls decided to skip school. They were last spotted hitchhiking around the city. Neither Tammy nor Angela has been seen or heard from since that day. Both girls had a history of running away from home together, which initially led authorities to believe they had simply left voluntarily again. Their prior disappearances made law enforcement hesitant to treat the situation as serious, and the case didn't get immediate attention. However, as time went on and the girls failed to return or contact their families, concern grew that something more sinister had happened. In the months following their disappearance, there were a few unconfirmed reports that suggested the girls might still be alive. One of the girls' mothers claimed to have received a phone call from someone saying she was her daughter and that she was fine. There was also a reported sighting of Tammy and Angela at a grocery store, but this was never verified. Despite these leads, no concrete evidence surfaced to prove the girls were safe. An important figure in the investigation is Earl Conrad Bramblett, a family acquaintance who had ties to both girls. Tammy and Angela reportedly worked for Bramblett in 1977, and Tammy's mother confirmed that her daughter frequently spent time at his home. Bramblett, however, had a disturbing history. He was known for having few adult friends and often surrounded himself with children, raising concerns about his intentions. In 1980, during a party, Bramblett allegedly made a chilling statement, saying he regretted having hurt Tammy back in 1977. Bramblett's behavior became even more concerning in the years that followed. In 1984, he was charged with molesting a 10-year-old girl, though he was later acquitted. Tammy's older sister also accused Britt of molesting her when she was 12 years old and suspected he did the same to Tammy. Despite these troubling allegations, no charges were ever filed against Britt concerning Tammy and Angela's disappearances. In 1994, Britt was convicted of a horrific crime, the murder of the Hodges family in Virginia. Blaine and Teresa Hodges, along with their 2 young children, were brutally killed, and Britt was living with the family at the time. The motive behind the murders remains unclear, but a jailhouse informant claimed that Britt told him he killed the Hodges family after being caught molesting one of the children. Although the informant later recanted his statement, Britt was sentenced to death for the murders. He continued to maintain his innocence up until his execution in April 2003. In the years before his execution, Britt remained a person of interest in the disappearances of Tammy and Angela. 8 months after he was sent to death row, police decided to search the yard of the house he had been living in at the time the girls vanished. Investigators suspected the girls' remains might be buried there, particularly in the basement, but the current owners of the home refused to let them search inside. The search of the yard turned up nothing, and the theory that the girls were buried on the property remains unproven. Britt offered his own theory about what happened to Tammy. He claimed she died in a bonfire in Central Florida in 1980 and accused police of covering it up. However, there is no evidence to support this claim. Britt also argued that his statement about hurting Tammy was taken out of context and that he had been drunk when he made the comment. Over the years, Britt gained some supporters, particularly online, who believed he was wrongly accused of both the Hodges family murders and any involvement in Tammy and Angela's disappearances. They maintained that the girls ran away voluntarily and likely started new lives elsewhere. However, Tammy's family strongly believes she is deceased and that Britt played a role in her fate. Angela's mother, who passed away before seeing any resolution to the case, held on to hope that her daughter might still be alive. To this day, both Tammy and Angela's cases remain open and unsolved. On April 16, 1990, Jamal Abdul Farouk, a 7-year-old boy, was dropped off at his mother's apartment, along with his 8-year-old brother Basil, by their stepmother. The apartment was located in the 1700 block of Clarkson Road in Chesterfield County, Virginia. Their mother, Tambra Ellis, who had worked a night shift the previous evening, went to take a nap while the boys played outside in the front yard. It was around 2:30 p.m. when the boys were last seen. After waking from her nap, Tambra discovered that her sons were no longer in the yard. She searched the area frantically, calling out for them and checking nearby spots where they might be playing. However, after 45 minutes of desperate searching, she realized something was wrong and contacted the police to report them missing. As the hours passed and the boys did not return, concern grew within the community. 3 days later, on April 19th, tragedy struck when Basil's body was discovered in a Chesterfield County landfill about 10 miles from their home. He was still fully clothed, but his small body had been bound, gagged, and stabbed twice in the back. The autopsy revealed that his skull had been fractured post-mortem. His murderer had placed his lifeless body into a plastic garbage bag and dumped it into a dumpster, which led to its eventual disposal at the landfill. The discovery of Basil's body sent shockwaves through the community and intensified the search for Jamal, but there was no sign of him at the scene, and he has never been heard from again. Following the grisly discovery, suspicion fell on the boy's father, Everett Abdul Farouk. Investigators detained him for 3 hours for questioning. Court documents later revealed that the authorities initially believed Basil might have been injured or killed inside his father's residence. However, a thorough search of Everett's property turned up no evidence to support this theory, and he was eventually released. While Everett was never formally implicated in his son's cases, his refusal to take a polygraph test raised eyebrows. He cited his Muslim faith as the reason for declining the test, stating that it was against his religious beliefs. Despite this, both Everett and Tambra were ultimately ruled out as suspects in Jamal's disappearance and Basil's murder. In the Morton Aigeltinger, a professional photographer originally from Norway, was last seen on the evening of September 8, 2015, at a Sheetz gas station in Manassas Park, Virginia. Security footage captured him at 7:05 p.m., driving his green 2012 Ford F-150 pickup truck, which bore West Virginia license plate number 5XC590. The next day, Aigeltinger was scheduled to arrive at Osborne High School in Prince William County, Virginia, at 1 p.m. for a photo shoot. However, he never showed up, and he has not been seen or heard from since that sighting at the gas station. Since his disappearance, there has been no activity on his credit or debit cards. Days later, on the evening of September 14th, his truck was found abandoned but undamaged on John Risser Road in Charlestown, West Virginia. It was located about a mile from his 20-acre property on Cattail Run Road. Strangely, there was no sign of Aigeltinger at the scene, and his wallet and cell phone were missing. Aigeltinger lived on the property with his sometime girlfriend, Gail Livingstone, and her mother. It was Livingstone who reported him missing, telling police that Aigeltinger had left home at 6 a.m. on September 9th to head to the photo shoot in Prince William County. However, several details have raised questions about her account. Investigators discovered Aigeltinger's camera bag, which contained thousands of dollars worth of photography equipment, in a barn on the property. According to friends, Aigeltinger never went anywhere without his cameras and was very protective of his gear. The fact that he left the bag behind cast doubt on the story that he was headed to a professional engagement. There were also inconsistencies with the timeline. The high school was only 55 miles away, so it made no sense for Aigeltinger to leave at 6 a.m. for a 1 p.m. appointment. This discrepancy, along with the abandoned truck and untouched bank accounts, raised suspicions of foul play. Tensions between Aigeltinger and Livingstone further complicated the investigation. Prior to his disappearance, Aigeltinger had reportedly told Livingstone that her mother needed to move out of their shared home. He had also discovered that Livingstone had taken out credit cards in his name without his permission, racking up thousands of dollars in debt. Aigeltinger was considering pressing charges against her, and this conflict may have contributed to his disappearance. Despite these concerns, Livingstone has denied any involvement in Aigeltinger's disappearance. She maintains that she had nothing to do with what happened and has since relocated to Maryland. Authorities, however, remain suspicious of the circumstances. Aigeltinger's friends described him as a talented and passionate photographer who would never leave his work behind or abandon his responsibilities. Born in Norway, Aigeltinger earned a degree in philosophy from the University of Oslo before moving to the United States in the 1980s. He studied photography at the prestigious Brooks Institute of Photography in California and made a living shooting portraits and videos. His work had appeared in national newspapers and magazines. He held a 10-year work visa and had built a life for himself in the U.S., though his only living blood relative, a sister, still resides in Norway. To this day, no trace of Morton Aigeltinger has been found, and his case remains unsolved. Elizabeth Acton vanished on August 24, 1994, after being last seen at the Days Inn on Colonial Avenue in Colonial Beach, Virginia. The 45-year-old nursing educator, who worked at Central Baptist Hospital, never returned to her job or made contact with anyone after that day. When investigators searched her hotel room, they found blood, raising immediate concern. However, her boyfriend, Willow Bruce Cherry, dismissed it as menstrual blood, an explanation that did little to ease suspicions. Compounding the mystery was the fact that Acton's car was later found abandoned in a different location, adding another layer of confusion to her disappearance. Despite the disturbing circumstances, the case went cold for years with no new leads. That is, until September 2018, when Cherry was arrested for an unrelated murder. Cherry was charged with first-degree murder in the presumed death of his brother-in-law, Peter Lien, who disappeared in February 2018. Although Lien's body has never been found, Cherry was convicted and remains incarcerated in a Kentucky prison. A photo of Cherry accompanies Acton's case summary, but it's important to note that he has not been named as a suspect in her disappearance. However, Acton's coworkers offered a chilling detail when they revealed that she had expressed fear for her life before she went missing. According to them, Acton told her colleagues that if anything happened to her, the police should investigate Cherry. This statement, combined with Cherry's later murder conviction, has fueled speculation that he may have played a role in Acton's disappearance. Despite these suspicions, no direct evidence has tied him to her case, and Acton remains a missing person more than 3 decades later. The details of her disappearance, coupled with Cherry's violent criminal history, cast a dark shadow over the case. But without a body or more concrete evidence, her fate remains unknown. Zabala Alam was last seen on the evening of June 25, 1998, after leaving a friend's house to head to Union Station in Washington, D.C., for a landscaping job interview. The job offer had come through a flyer that had been slipped under his front door, promising $11 an hour with benefits. Alam had called the number on the flyer and spoken to a man named Mr. Felice, who instructed him to meet his secretary at Union Station for the interview. However, Alam never made it to the meeting, and his disappearance would soon uncover a sinister plot. At 6 p.m., on his way to the interview, Alam was stopped by police in downtown Washington, D.C., near the 1200 block of F Street Northwest, and issued a citation for not wearing a seatbelt. This traffic stop was the last confirmed sighting of him. After that, he vanished without a trace. Alam was driving a red 1985 BMW with Virginia license plates at the time of his disappearance. The car was discovered abandoned over a month later on July 28th, parked near the Cedar Ridge apartment complex in Lanham, Maryland, close to Temple Hills. There was no sign of Alam, and the vehicle offered no leads. Alam also never picked up his final paycheck from his job at the Fish Market restaurant in Alexandria, Virginia, where he worked as a server. At the time of his disappearance, he carried no credit cards, passport, or significant amount of cash, and he was in the process of becoming a U.S. citizen. The circumstances surrounding Alam's disappearance became more alarming when investigators uncovered a troubling event from his recent past. Just 2 months before he went missing, Alam had interrupted a burglary at his apartment in Groveton, Virginia, which he shared with his cousin and 2 aunts. Returning home from work at 2 a.m., he found an intruder inside, holding his aunt's purse. The burglar fled, but Alam called the police, and after a high-speed chase, authorities apprehended the suspect, identifying him as Christopher Andrew Wills. Wills, who had a lengthy criminal record, was no stranger to law enforcement. He had been charged with armed robbery and carjacking in Baltimore in 1996, but was released from custody in late 1997 after his right to a speedy trial had been violated. Following his April 1998 arrest for the burglary at Alam's apartment, Wills was released on bail while awaiting trial. On June 15, 1998, Alam testified at Wills's preliminary hearing, directly identifying him as the burglar. That same evening, Wills made a phone call from jail to his brother, who was incarcerated in another prison. During the recorded call, Wills mentioned having a plan to prevent Alam from testifying further. He specifically referred to flyers and said he intended to get Alam and hurt him. In subsequent conversations with his brother over the following days, Wills continued to elaborate on his plans, indicating that he was actively preparing something to harm Alam. Just 10 days later, Alam disappeared. The investigation into Alam's disappearance quickly focused on Wills as the prime suspect. Authorities believe that Wills had concocted an elaborate scheme to lure Alam using the landscaping job flyer, printing it as a trap to get him alone. Evidence confirmed that the phone number on the flyer led to a cell phone purchased by Wills. Investigators suspected that Wills had lured Alam to the meeting spot at Union Station under the guise of a job interview, then abducted and killed him to stop him from testifying in the upcoming burglary trial. In November 1999, more than a year after Alam vanished, Wills was formally charged with kidnapping. The following month, he was hit with an additional charge of interstate stalking resulting in death. By that time, Wills was already in federal prison, serving a 12-year sentence for an unrelated robbery. Despite his incarceration, authorities moved forward with their case against him in connection to Alam's presumed murder. Wills, who opted to represent himself in court, went on trial in October 2001. The proceedings lasted 3 weeks, and the evidence against him, particularly the phone records and the content of his recorded prison calls, was damning. The jury found him guilty, and Wills was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although Wills was convicted of killing Zabala Alam, Alam's body has never been found. His family has been left without closure, and the exact details of what happened to him after he was lured to Union Station remain a mystery. Alam was only 25 years old at the time of his disappearance. He had been working hard to build a life for himself in the United States, balancing his job at the Fish Market restaurant with his studies at Northern Virginia Community College. He was also on the path to U.S. citizenship and had no known reason to disappear voluntarily. Caitlyn Akens was last seen in Springfield, Virginia, on December 5, 2015. The 19-year-old had been visiting family in Virginia and was scheduled to fly back to Arizona that afternoon, where she lived with her fiancé and was excited to start cosmetology school. Her former stepfather, James Branton, was supposed to drive her to Reagan National Airport for her 5 p.m. flight. However, instead of taking her directly to the airport, Branton claimed Akens wanted to stop at the Springfield Town Center Mall before heading to the airport, so he dropped her off there around 1:52 p.m. According to Branton, she planned to walk to the nearby Franconia Springfield metro station and take the train to the airport on her own. 8 minutes after Branton texted Akens' mother to say he had dropped her off at the mall, her mother received a text from Caitlyn's phone stating, "I'm at the airport. Battery dying, so won't be able to text for a bit." This was the last message from Akens' phone that seemed to come directly from her. However, she never boarded her flight to Arizona, never arrived at her destination, and has not been heard from again. About 5 hours later, Akens' mother received a series of text messages from her daughter's phone that raised immediate alarm. The messages stated that Caitlyn was staying with a friend and needed some time alone. These messages were concerning because they were out of character for Caitlyn, and they weren't sent from the airport as one might expect. Instead, phone records showed her device was pinging off cell towers near Interstate 95 in Stafford County, Virginia, far from Reagan National Airport. Investigators quickly grew suspicious of Branton's version of events, especially after they discovered that he had not actually dropped her off at the mall as he had claimed. This raised serious doubts about his account of the last time he saw her. A few days after Akens disappeared, a crucial piece of evidence was found: her blue suitcase. The suitcase was discovered in a drainage ditch along River Road near the intersection with Fall Hill Avenue in Fredericksburg, Virginia. This location was a few miles from Branton's home and nowhere near Reagan National Airport. The suitcase was unzipped and appeared to have been tampered with. Inside, authorities found Akens' wallet, cash, identification, phone charger, glasses, and credit and debit cards, but her clothes and high school diploma were missing. The suitcase itself was damaged, with one of its wheels missing, suggesting it had been dragged or fallen into the ditch where it was found. The discovery of the suitcase deepened the mystery, as it indicated someone had intentionally discarded it far from where Akens was supposedly headed. Adding to the suspicion around Branton was his behavior during the investigation. He was the last confirmed person to see Caitlyn, but he refused to cooperate with police. He would not allow investigators to search his phone, nor would he take a polygraph test. His refusal to assist in the search for Akens or to clarify inconsistencies in his story has made him a person of interest in the case, though he has not been formally charged with any crime related to her disappearance. Akens had no history of mental illness and no history of disappearing without warning. Her friends and family insist it would have been completely out of character for her to leave her life behind voluntarily, especially since she had been eagerly preparing to start cosmetology school. Investigators agree that it is highly unlikely she left on her own accord and believe she met with foul play. Caitlyn's case remains unsolved, and the circumstances of her disappearance remain suspicious. Cody Bigsby, a 4-year-old boy, was last seen asleep at his family's home at the Buckrow Point Townhomes on Ronelette Drive in Hampton, Virginia, around 2 a.m. on January 31, 2022. He lived there with his father, Cody Bigsby, and his three brothers, a 5-year-old and 2-year-old twins. Cody claimed he discovered Cody missing when he woke up that morning and notified the police around 9 a.m. The day Cody vanished was also the day the family was supposed to move to a new house, raising further suspicions. From the outset, authorities were doubtful of Cody's story, believing Cody may have disappeared much earlier than Cody claimed. Their suspicions intensified after Cody's arrest on February 3, 2022, when he was charged with 7 counts of felony child neglect. He admitted to leaving his young children home alone for hours on multiple occasions in December 2021 and January 2022, citing that the children were too much of a handful and that hiring a babysitter never occurred to him. In July 2022, Cody faced additional indictments, 23 more charges, including child abuse, child neglect for leaving the children alone, and failure to seek medical care for an injured child. These charges were related to his parenting in the months before Cody's disappearance, not the disappearance itself. If convicted on all counts, Cody could face up to 162 years in prison. Authorities believe that Cody's version of events about Cody's disappearance did not align with the evidence. His attorneys, however, argued that Cody was mistreated during police interrogations, describing the case as a modern-day lynching. Records show that Cody was questioned from 9:30 p.m. on January 31st until 4:45 a.m. the next day. After this interrogation, he was left isolated for 8 hours. During questioning, he repeatedly said he was tired and wanted to leave, but officers told him, "Going home is not an option." Though he wasn't under arrest at the time, Cody's requests for legal representation were ignored twice. This led to the removal of the lead detective, who was placed on paid administrative leave, and another detective took over the case. There was also a documented history of domestic violence between Cody and Cody's mother, Dina Abdul Karim. In 2018, Karim told police that Cody had choked, bitten, and threatened to kill her. However, the charges were dropped after Karim failed to appear in court. Following Cody's disappearance, Karim was investigated and ruled out as a suspect. In June 2023, Cody was charged with second-degree murder and concealment of a body in Cody's presumed death. Authorities stated that they believe Cody was beaten to death by his father on June 18, 2021, more than 6 months before Cody reported him missing. They claimed Cody buried Cody's body in a wooded area in Maryland. At Cody's trial in March 2024, devastating testimony came from Cody's older brother, who was 7 years old at the time. He stated that when he was 4 years old, he tried to wake up Cody but couldn't. He recalled that Cody's face was red and bruised, and although Cody told him Cody was fine, the boy thought his brother was dead. This was the last time he saw Cody. Based on his testimony, investigators believe Cody's death occurred sometime before December 24, 2021, the date his brother turned 5. Karim also testified at the trial, stating she hadn't been in a relationship with Cody since 2019 and had left her children in his care after being hospitalized in 2020. According to Karim, Cody didn't initially want custody of Cody and often referred to him as a mama's boy. The last time Karim saw her children was in November 2020, and Cody refused to give her his new address, preventing her from visiting them. She said her last conversation with Cody was in April 2021. That same month, Cody emailed Karim, writing, "I need to bring Cody back to you. I don't want to severely hurt him." He also claimed that Cody had behaved inappropriately toward his younger brothers, an allegation Karim did not believe. Despite his claims of innocence, Cody was convicted of second-degree murder and concealment of a body. He faces up to 45 years in prison for these charges. Meanwhile, he still awaits trial on the earlier child neglect and abuse charges. Cody's surviving siblings, who were living with him at the time of his disappearance, have since been placed in foster care. Authorities continue to believe Cody was the victim of foul play, and his body has yet to be found. His case remains open as investigators hope to bring closure to a family torn apart by tragedy. On April 11, 2011, James Britt, a Portsmouth, Virginia resident, was last seen alive. 4 days later, police conducted a welfare check at his home on Moonlit Avenue after concerned friends reported him missing. What they found inside the house shocked investigators and painted a grim picture of what had happened to James Britt. When officers entered Britt's home on April 15th, they were met with a gruesome crime scene. Blood spattered across the walls, floors, and ceiling. Blood soaked through the carpet into the padding beneath -5 of Britt's teeth were scattered on the floor. Someone had attempted to cover up the evidence by bleaching the stains and painting over the blood, but it wasn't enough to hide the horrific aftermath of what had taken place. Although James Britt's body was missing, police quickly determined there had been enough blood lost to declare him dead. In August 2011, James Britt was legally declared deceased, even though his remains had not been recovered. About a year after Britt's disappearance, police arrested Freddie Lee Hall, Jr., a man from Florida, and charged him with first-degree murder. Hall and Britt had a business relationship for 2 years. Britt sold high-end used cars, and Hall was supposed to do repair work on them. However, their relationship had soured in the weeks leading up to Britt's disappearance. Britt had confided in friends that Hall had been paid to fix a car but never did the work. Hall refused to return the money. Hall had shown up at Britt's home twice and was harassing and stalking him. Britt never expressed fear for his safety, but the tension between the two men was evident. During their investigation, police uncovered damning evidence tying Freddie Hall to Britt's presumed murder. -2 of Britt's cars were found at the homes of 2 women Hall was staying with. Hall had possession of the cars' titles and claimed Britt sold him the vehicles. Britt's friends disputed this claim, stating he loved those cars and wouldn't have sold them. Forensic evidence further implicated Hall. Hall's fingerprints were found in Britt's master bedroom. A 9mm cartridge case was discovered inside the house. Police found a receipt in Hall's car for 9mm bullets purchased 5 days before Britt's murder. In January 2013, Freddie Hall was tried for first-degree murder. The jury heard the evidence, including Hall's motive, a financial dispute with Britt over unpaid car repairs, his presence at the crime scene, his attempt to cover his tracks by possessing Britt's cars, and the bullet receipt. After deliberating, the jury found Hall guilty and recommended a life sentence without the possibility of parole. James Britt was a hard-working, intelligent man who had paid his way through college and built a successful career in the used car business. At the time of his disappearance, he was unmarried and childless. He is survived by one brother, who described him as dedicated, driven, and responsible. Despite Hall's conviction, James Britt's remains have never been found. Authorities and Britt's family continue to hold out hope that one day his body will be recovered, providing closure to his loved ones. Anyone with information about James Britt's whereabouts is urged to contact the Portsmouth Police Department or Crime Stoppers at Lock You Up. Nancy Brittner was last seen at the Relax Inn, located in the 2600 block of Valley Avenue in Winchester, Virginia, around midnight on June 29, 2023. She had been visiting her sister, who lived in an efficiency apartment at the motel. The two women spent the evening together, and Brittner's sister fell asleep around 11:30 p.m. When she awoke the next morning, Nancy was gone. There was no sign of a struggle, and the door to the apartment was locked from the outside, leading her sister to believe that Brittner had left voluntarily and locked the door behind her. It was unusual for Brittner to leave without saying goodbye, but her sister initially assumed there was no cause for concern. Shortly after midnight, Nancy made a phone call to her fiancé, who was working a night shift at the time. The conversation seemed normal, and she gave no indication that anything was wrong. After hanging up with her fiancé, Brittner sent a text message to her niece, asking for a ride back to her home on North Kent Street, located about 2 miles away from the Relax Inn. Her niece replied to the message offering to come pick her up, but Nancy never responded. Her niece assumed she had found another way home and didn't think much of it at the time. Brittner could have stayed the night at her sister's apartment, but she was eager to get back to her own home because she was expecting a special visit the following day from her adult son and his children. It had been nearly a year since she had seen them, and she was excited to reconnect. Her family said she was looking forward to spending time with them, which made her sudden disappearance all the more baffling. Nancy never made it home that night, and she has not been seen or heard from since. Both of her prepaid cell phones were turned off shortly after she sent her last text, and neither phone has been used again. Investigators were able to trace one of the phones to an undisclosed location in Frederick County, Virginia, where it was turned off for the final time. Beyond that, there have been no leads on her whereabouts. Nancy Brittner's family describes her as a dedicated mother and grandmother who was deeply rooted in her community and close with her relatives. She had 13 grandchildren, whom she adored, and she spent much of her time helping her loved ones. At the time of her disappearance, Nancy was actively helping care for her sister, who was undergoing treatment for cancer. Her sister has since expressed how much Nancy's support meant to her during that difficult period. The day before she vanished, Nancy had dropped off a box of food at her sister's apartment, a small act of kindness that exemplified her generous spirit. Her family has emphasized that she was a homebody with no history of leaving without warning or cutting off contact. Her sudden disappearance has left them devastated and desperate for answers. Authorities have not ruled out foul play in Nancy's case, but they have not named any suspects or persons of interest. Her family believes it's likely that she got into a vehicle with someone she knew, as it would have been out of character for her to accept a ride from a stranger. Despite their efforts to find her, including distributing missing person flyers and organizing searches, there have been no significant developments in the investigation. The case remains unsolved.